Hey everyone, in this video we're gonna try to recreate this graph that I've got here on my screen. As you can see, it's not too big, so I'm hoping we're gonna just pack this into one video rather than two. And that's the end texture that we're gonna try to achieve, or at least stay as close as possible to this reference. Okay, I also exported this into the game engine, so let me just grab Unreal, and I've managed to create this sort of effect with that texture. So obviously there are some sparks and there's some glow around it, but if I isolate this particle system, you can clearly see that that's the texture I'm using with some erosion on top. I also just duplicated that system, put the erosion slightly higher to get those sort of details going outwards as well. And that's the final effect. Right, so let's dive into Substance now, when I'm gonna actually show you how to create this graph. So I'm gonna press Tab and start typing Starburst. I'm gonna select Starburst node. I'm gonna go for the shape next as well. And I find that the Torn actually gonna work the best, or the one above Torn, okay? And what we're gonna do, we're gonna run it through Warp. And the shape actually gonna be our gradient input. In the shape, we actually let's select the one above Torn, that one, and in the warp, let's put some crazy value, like maybe let's start with 30. As you can see, we already got some sort of radial texture. So if you just scroll this down and ramp it up to your 30 or even more, maybe 35, you see this basically. And now we can go back to Starburst and start tweaking some nodes here. So for the branches, I'm gonna go maybe for 8. Blur amount, I'm gonna go for minimum, maybe 0.1. Randomness, some high value, maybe 0.85. Size min, I'm gonna shrink it maybe to 0.05. And max, let's just ramp it up just to see if we are going outside of the box. And actually I'm gonna select our warp and select the tiling on this node as well, and on the Starburst as well, just to make sure we're not using any tiling options on this one. Right, so let's go back to Starburst and let's maybe start tweaking some changes. So maybe for the blur amount, let's go for 0.05, and min size, let's reduce it to 0.02, so it's a bit more sharper, as you can see here. Cool, so let's leave this for now. Although we can tweak the size variation, I think. Yeah, I think this just gives a little bit more randomness to it. And now we can tweak the size max. Maybe let's ramp it up a bit. Okay, I want to actually keep the size min to some low value. Right, so what next? I'm actually going to invert this. And I'm going to use this for our multiply, because as you can see here, we got this middle bit. I want to get rid of it, so I'm going to use blend next. Put this here, and I'm actually going to multiply with that texture, which essentially going to get rid of that middle bit. Cool, so the next thing is I actually want to extract some of the brightest points on that texture. So I want to use those as a highlights, okay? So before I do that, I'm actually going to blur this a little bit. Okay, let's try maybe 3 for the intensity. Now I'm gonna try to use threshold node just to extract those little bits, and I'm gonna use them as a highlights. And next gonna be blur, just a little bit of a blur. And now I'm just gonna blend those together. And I actually want this node to go to the top because I want to control the opacity of that one, and that one to the second slot. I'm gonna change it to add, and now if you change the opacity, you control this circle. Okay, as you can see, we're kind of getting those highlights there. To be honest, I just want a little bit of those highlights, so what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna blur it a little bit, and it's gonna reduce the amount of those. Okay, and plus on top I want something similar, so I'm just gonna select those 3, copy paste, and for the threshold I'm just gonna crank it up a bit to get additional highlights as well. And I'm gonna add those to another blend node with the same technique. So add, and now we can control the opacity of the texture that is underneath. Cool, so now we got this, and what we're gonna do, let's try to maybe add that one basically. That's another blur, and I think it gives us a really good result, so I'm gonna use it with some pretty default settings, maybe just a little bit of a blur with a maximum quality, and that's gonna give us this nice glow around the texture. And what I want to do also, I want to actually use slope blur to create another glow around this. I need shape for our slope, and I'm gonna use this soft circle texture here. For the samples, I'm gonna go for max. I'm gonna copy this slope blur, and I'm actually gonna insert the minus value on the intensity. I'm gonna blend those two together because I want them to go outwards and inwards as well. I'm gonna set them maybe to add. They kind of blend nicely together, and now we can add this to our main texture. Well, let's add it first to our main texture like this, and actually we want to control the opacity of this, what we made here. So this goes to the first slot. I'm gonna set it to add, and now I can control this opacity because I just want a little bit of a blur around those edges and areas. And the next bit, I'm actually gonna add this blur. So blend, that goes to the top, and set it to add. And we're getting even more glow around those areas. Cool, so now we've got this, what we actually want next is to maybe highlight a little bit and add that circle a little bit more to that texture. Okay, so what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna go back to let's maybe take this one. I'm gonna warp it. I'm gonna warp it with our initial texture for the warp, and now I'm just gonna run it through radial blur just to get some nice blur around our areas. Okay, so I'm just gonna ramp up the samples. Angle, I just want to adjust a little bit, so maybe 0.03. I'm gonna copy this, paste, and set the angle to minus value. I'm gonna blend those together using maybe let's try add. I think add might work, but let's try maybe something else. No, okay, let's try maybe max and see if we can actually blend those together. Okay, and now we can control the opacity, which gives us additional glow data for the texture. Cool, it would be also good to add some lenses around this. Okay, so what we could do, we could grab another starburst and just randomize it as well. So maybe 7 branches, blur amount, let's keep it to minimum, 0.1, randomness, 0.7, max size, min size, lower, and size variation to high value. And I'm gonna disable tiling for that one as well. Okay. I think I'm just gonna shrink the size max a bit. And let's maybe increase the size min like this. The next thing is I'm actually gonna blend this with the shape. Oops. For the shape, I'm gonna maybe go with soft circle here and maybe set this to subtract. Obviously we're subtracting a lot, so let's maybe select this shape and let's scale it down until we get some really cool looking lenses like those, for example. And let's see if we can blend those together. I'm gonna set it to add. Okay, so we got those nice lenses going outwards now, but let's maybe, you can also increase the branches if you want. I want to keep it to minimum, to maybe, let's maybe go for 10, so we get a bit more on those areas as well. And now if you don't want that many or that kind of opacity, you can change the opacity settings in that blend node. And now I want some sharp lines as well, so I'm gonna duplicate this system here, preview my blend, select the starburst, and actually now I'm gonna shrink down the size min and maybe increase the branches to, or maybe decrease it actually to maybe 7. Okay, blur amount, maybe increase it, and size min as well, just so we can get a bit more data on our textures. I'm gonna also run it through auto levels to get them a bit more brighter. And next, I actually want to run it through blend. Now let's see what's gonna happen if we're actually gonna add them. So they're kind of there, but I'm kind of aiming for something else. I actually want to extract them. So let's maybe try subtract, multiply, and I think multiply works well because I actually want a little of those lenses. So I think I'm just gonna run it with multiply. Although let's maybe change the order of this, and I think, yeah, those are the same results, to be honest. So let's blend it now with the original texture. And those lenses, we actually want to go to the top, so we can control the opacity. I'm gonna set them to add. Whoops, let me detach this from opacity and actually plug it into the second input. So they kind of blurry a little bit, so maybe let's reduce the blur of the min size. So as you can see, we kind of want those tiny lenses, very sharp as well. So I'm gonna increase the branches. Let's even go with 15. Actually 200 looks nice as well, but let's maybe come back to this later. Let's go with 20. And now let's maybe create some colors. So let's run it through gradient map. In the gradient map, let's pick some colors. So I'm gonna maybe go, the white will be at the beginning because that will be our core. Whoops, that one, let's make it kind of yellow-ish. This one will be around here. Let's make it orange, kind of dark orange maybe. And here right at the end, let's maybe add a bit more purple color, darker purple. So I think we're getting too much white color there, and it's a bit, transition is a bit sharp as well. So maybe before plugging this here, let's run it through blur so we can soften those transition a little bit. I'm gonna double click on the gradient, click once on the blur, and start reducing it slowly. So I get maybe something like this. Right, so we got like a hotspots areas, which is nice. And now it's the time actually to go back and maybe move those parameters a bit, so the transition between the colors will be a little bit softer and better. So I kind of like this. So next, maybe let's run it through glow. And for the glow, let's change the color maybe to orange. Glow amount, let's max it. Okay, and glow size, let's max it as well. Right, so this is what we got essentially. Now you can go back maybe to this starburst, tweak those branches to max, and you can get those updated straight away. Okay. The next thing what you want to do actually before you export this, you can just add this to alpha merge. So you plug in straight into RGB. I think in one of the previous video I actually presented a split. It was RGBA split. Sorry, not this one. I'm sorry, it was merge. Okay, so it was RGBA merge, and you can actually be RGB values. However, if you got already like a color texture, you can plug it straight into alpha merge, and then you can use the alpha channel as well. And for the alpha channel, you can maybe drag this straight to the alpha, double click on this and preview alpha with this button, and that's how your alpha is going to look like. However, you can run it through levels first, plug it back in, and now you can control your alpha with the levels. Okay, so maybe, sorry, that one. Yeah, if you want a bit more darker areas to be visible, you can just play with your levels to get the results that you actually want. Or you can even bring a bit more data around this texture and then keep tweaking the settings in your levels. Okay, so that's the texture. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're going to use it for various stuff. I personally use those sort of textures and those sort of techniques for any impacts. I think it could be really good for the decals as well. Another cool thing that you could actually do is, let me move this a little bit, and you can create like a cool alpha. So let me show you. I'm going to create a shape node, shrink it to maybe this size, run it through shape mapper. In the shape mapper, I'm going to go for the pattern amount of 1, width of 0, and the radius of 1. And now what you could see, I can click on the shape here, and with this slider I control the mask, and it's going to give me really cool mask. I can also rotate it if I want as well. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run it through blur just to soften this a little bit, and on the blur I'm actually going to disable the tiling as well because I don't need those bits here. And what we could do now, we can blend this with our mask, set it to multiply, and essentially you can control this with the one single slider. So if you want this to be a bit more sharper, what you can do, you can just go to the blur and decrease it. Now go to the shape mapper, use your rotation to control what sort of parts you want to extract. So let's say I kind of like this look, or maybe that one as well. So let me rotate it. Actually, that one on the bottom looks cool. So I'm just gonna focus on that one, decrease this mask, go back to the shape mapper, rotate it a bit, and I can extract this only as an impact. Okay, so once I got this, I can actually run it through transformation, center it, or create like a sort of sub UV texture 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, and pick randomly in the engine one of those textures. Okay, so let me run it through the colors, and we essentially getting we could get various impacts. Okay, now go to the shape mapper if you want to pick a different one and use this, and this could be like a directional impact. We can even reduce this mask, and let's say we just want to extract this spike, and we can get a bunch of those spikes into one single texture and pick randomly for our effects. Right, let me plug in our main texture, that one, and yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're gonna use some of the techniques to use in your texture creation. Thanks for watching.